Today, under these gray skies, stands the gray 4th generation Dell Dimension XPS. This gaming-oriented tower from the mid-2000s is the result of an over-the-top merging of the Precision and Dimension product lines. It isn't the first of this kind of XPS, as shown by the Gen 4 model number, but it does still stand out as a beast of a tower in any more modern computer collection. The questionable plastic doors, big shield up front, and massive proprietary power supply certainly drew attention then, and still does, for better or worse. Inside the clamshell case is a 3.4 GHz Pentium 4 550, 1 GB of DDR2, a 256 MB Nvidia 6800 XT PCIe graphics card, a Sound Blaster Audigy 2 ZS sound card, a 250 GB Western Digital SATA hard drive, the usual IDE DVD drives, and a 460 watt Dell power supply that spans the entire bottom of the case. There is also a large fan duct on the side for supplying direct cooling to the graphics card, and other plastic pieces that probably don't need to be there. Removing the massive processor cooling shroud shows an interesting push-pull fan configuration, covering a basic Dell heatsink tower. Next to that, the capacitors are actually in good shape here and all across the board. Much welcome news considering the Dimension 8400 in the last video needed these replaced. Speaking of the 8400, these two systems are very closely related and similarly spec'd. I picked up both of these with the same exact processor, video card, and Intel 925X chipset. These are so similar that back in their day, there often was debate as to which one to get and why more should be paid for the XPS Gen 3 or 4. As with most things, it came down to expandability, purpose, and price. All things considered, getting the 8400 and upgrading the power supply as I did with mine probably would have been the smarter move for longevity. On the other hand, shiny gamer things. Physical size was also an obvious factor here. I keep saying this, but this case is a beast. Originally from the Precision line, this case is not only taller and wider than the 8400, it also tended to be heavier by a considerable amount. With these two specifically, the 8400 came in at just under 32 pounds, while the XPS comes in at just over 42 pounds. Chonker! The other obvious difference would be the plastic doors on the front. The tiny one hides front USB and audio, while the main door is for floppy and optical drive access. I have no problem with condemning this design, as the flimsy and overcomplicated plastic hinges were practically made to break. So many of these never survived basic use, and it's a miracle this one is still intact. The hinges catch on themselves and the case while in the open position, turning the door into a point of leverage that certainly places a lot of stress on the plastics. If you don't do it just right, the door will either not seat and close properly, or snap goes everything. First order of business was to take out the two 512 MB RAM modules and replace them with two 1 GB sticks. I've had these Patriot sticks waiting around for I don't know how many years, so it was good to find something to throw them into. Oh, never mind. They've given up the ghost. Great. 2 sticks of basic Samsung memory it is. Powering this thing up reveals another gamery feature of the case: fancy LED lighting. It's not a mid-2000s gaming computer without some of that, right? It also has RGB. The BIOS has a special selection just for the front LED, and while it is indeed a novelty, it's one I can appreciate. Being able to turn this LED off entirely is also a nice consideration. For game benchmarking, the difference between this XPS and the 8400 is so minimal the results could be considered within margin of error. The XPS does push ahead in some places, most likely from being able to utilize dual-channel memory, but even then the gains aren't all that impressive. Some FPS results for games were skewed slightly from me not properly timing the benchmarks on the 8400, but just looking at the performance will indicate the similarities anyway. The XPS still technically came out ahead, and while I expected a little better from it, none of this is really a surprise. Those poor GeForce 6 cards do their best, but don't quite cut it in these configurations. I did start wondering though if the drivers weren't identifying these cards properly. GPU-Z, CPU-Z, Windows and Nvidia software all indicate these are 6800 XTs, but looking up the markings on the cards themselves indicate these may be the Quadro FX 3400. It seems like Dell was playing some firmware games with these. In any case, I happen to have a regular 6800 I tried 3D Mark with, and almost all the same results were produced. Looking through my stockpile for graphics cards that wouldn't strain the XPS's power supply too much, I came across this Radeon 3870 from VisionTech. The motherboard doesn't have PCIe 2.0, but given what I have on hand, it was either this, older cards, or something like a GTX 280 or newer. Some minor bus performance problems aside, this should be a decent upgrade. Now those are some better numbers. It's nothing too spectacular, but improvement is improvement. 3D Mark 06 was brought up to much smoother levels, with games becoming much more playable. It has always held true that a good graphics card upgrade can make all the difference, and this is clearly no exception. It could still be better if I had more suitable parts to throw at this tower, but probably not by a whole lot. Even without upgrades, I'm still happy to have this monstrosity as part of the collection. The only other thing I can think of that may rival or complement this is an Alienware tower. I may try and get one eventually if prices come down. The Radeon 3870 was not my first choice for an upgrade, as I have a PNY 7900 GTX from one of my personal builds I did want to try. I didn't get footage of it, but the poor thing couldn't handle sitting in a box for years. All it did was produce rainbow vomit for a picture, and Windows was totally unusable. Oh well, these things happen. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna play with the LED some more. Thanks for watching.